Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As the old saying goes, breaking up is hard to do. And in the case of Robert and Amy, that is true. And of course, as I've hinted at a couple times, this is going to be the first of many times I'll be saying that about them. And this is probably the most bittersweet out of all of them because it's the first one. There's a little bit of that nostalgic value there. But plus, out of all of them, this is the only one that really is logical from Robert's side of things. There's going to be one very logical with Amy near the end, their last time they break up before they get back together in ring time. Now, the plot of the episode is we finally get to see how their relationship is evolving after Robert moved out of his parents' house. It's been a couple episodes. We saw where he first went. We saw a side episode, but now we're seeing the relationship fallout. It's been a while since we've seen Amy. She's been mentioned a couple times. Been a while since she's been there. We finally get to see her go to Robert's place after he's settled in. Everything seems nice. You can definitely tell Robert needs to get some more stuff. I mean, the first scene we see of him celebrating after talking with Marie on the phone is him making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with just his fingers scooping the peanut butter out, which I happen to have a jar here as an example. He's basically just doing this, scooping in and like wilking it on the bread, and he does the same thing with the jam. And then when Amy knocks on the door, he gets some peanut butter on his jukebox, or boombox, excuse me, and then he has to lick it off. Well, Amy comes in, they're all talking, celebrating, and then like that, you can tell where the issue is arising and stuff she's saying, because Amy loves Robert and Robert loves Amy. You can tell that by how they're talking, the dialogue. But you can tell that Amy is trying to do a little nudge. She's being a little subtle, but you can tell that right away. And you can also tell that Robert's getting a little uncomfortable. At first he's fine, he's just playing along with it. But then when she starts going in, and she doesn't say it outwardly, she's hinting about marriage, you know, I want the ring. You can tell that Robert's feeling a little uncomfortable about it, but they don't directly talk about it. It's just left unsaid. Now I get with how old Amy is at this point. I mean, she was 33 in the last season, so she'd be about 34-ish here, give or take, depending on when her birthday is, and Robert's in his 40s. Here he'd be around 43. So they're not getting any younger, so the need for her to want to be married, you understand. But as we find out later, Robert has a pretty good reason for wanting to take this part slow, even though they've been together about 2 years. And you can see why he has hesitation. He decides to go to Ray's house to talk with him. Ray's home alone. Deborah's out doing some stuff with the kids. But Ray's there waiting on her curtains, which are delivered by Doug, played by Kevin James, his first of a couple appearances as his character Doug from King of Queens, which the night that this episode premiered, there was also an episode of King of Queens that Ray and Robert guest starred on, which I'm still debating whether I'm going to go and watch that episode and do a review of it, but if I do, it'll probably be the next video after this one. Robert doesn't say it outwardly, but you could tell right away he just is going there to get cheered up by his brother, because, you know, brother's a little humorous. They're talking, and Ray's complaining a lot about marriage, and from what we saw before, we know Robert's not in the best mindset to be hearing a lot of this. He's doing prison jokes, all the ball and chain jokes. Robert's just sitting there listening, and to add to it, when we see Doug, when they mention, oh, you want to go play some golf? He's like, I can't, gotta go shopping with my wife. Wrong thing to hear, because as we find out later, once Deborah, you know, starts talking with Ray and starts referencing a lot of the jokes he made, have you kill bugs, meal fit for a hostage, find out from her that they broke up. And Ray's reaction to that, you can tell he's genuinely surprised, but that's everyone's reaction when they watch this episode the first time. But it's not as extreme, because we saw stuff that Ray is not privy to. So for us, it's like, oh. Whereas Ray's like, oh. Then, of course, you can only imagine what their reaction across the street probably is when they find out about it. It happens off-screen, but from what Deborah says, even though the way she's doing it, she's mocking Robert, because, she does the deep voice and she's kind of mocking what he said to Amy. Robert wanted to take things a little slow. Things are moving fast. I think we should pull back, give each other a little bit of space, and that led to Amy breaking up with him. Which, the way that Deborah explains it, you see, because it's like, hey, they've been together 2 years. This is the return on her investment. Nah, bollocks to that. But you also see a little bit from Robert's side. We saw how uncomfortable he was when they were talking. He probably should have actually brought that up when they were talking. It's like, I love you, Amy, but I think we shouldn't be going this fast just yet. Let me get settled in for a bit, and let me get a little bit more comfortable being out on my own, away from everyone else, which is something he does mention later on. And then we'll start bringing in the plan. But no, he just steps right away and says it the wrong way. You got to back up Amy, and then Amy, boom, totally gone. Of course, when Marie and Frank come in, they fully are blaming Ray about it, which I wouldn't really say this is Ray's fault. I mean, he obviously was not reading his brother just like Amy wasn't reading him. If there's anything that's in this episode is that you gotta have situational awareness, the phrase I use. Working in security, it's a phrase you really gotta have. You gotta be wearing like, okay, those two are about to get into a fight. Those two arguing, are they just, oh, they just got naturally loud voices. Alright, it's fine. Those guys drunk or are they just tired? Oh. You gotta be aware of your surroundings at all time, or else you're gonna walk into something. And that is learning from mistakes, by the way, in case anyone's wondering. And of course here, Ray and Amy don't really show any situational awareness, which part of it, as I've said before, I'll cite time and again, sitcom writing. You have to get the joke somehow. But part of it is also just them so lost in their own little thing that they're talking about that they don't notice how Robert is reacting. Now part of that could be how Brad Garrett interpreted the lines, but it could also be that they wrote it that way and they knew how Brad would play it, and then they just wrote the other characters to be like that. Either way, it does make for a fun episode, and this is in my top 10 favorite Everybody Loves Raymond episodes, so if you want to go back to that video, which has 10K views now, and have a little look at it to see my full thoughts on that when it came to the list, go ahead. Marie's the one that's more upset, obviously, because you're like, I put 2 years into this girl. She didn't want children when I met her. Which, hearing that again, it's like, I wonder what type of manipulation Marie must have done in order to get Amy to want children when she didn't before. Which is still kind of funny, because by show's end, they still don't have children. It's one of those things like, Marie. Manipulating, even if it's just subtle like that. And of course, Frankie's only upset because Marie went to him for comfort, as he said he's not set up for that. But, Frank, that's marriage. The moment you put that ring on Marie's finger, you signed up for that. But I think that's just how Frank is, his whole generation thing. His dad probably would have been worse with it, probably would have walked away, or heaven forbid, might have even hit her. But not really much said about Albert Barone, so we don't know if he would have been an abusive spouse or not. But I mean, we find out in another episode he hit Frank, so I wouldn't have put it past him to have hit Nani Barone. No, Robert finally shows up. They have a little conversation. Ray tries to pep him up, and he has a great little conversation about marriage, talking about the good things about it. It's not written with the biggest words. It's very simple language. But I believe it sums up the positive aspects about marriage pretty well. Like, you go home at night, she's there. You eat, she's there. Sleep, there. And I know that sounds like a bad thing, but it's not. Not if it's the right person. And he says other things leading up to it. When you're married, there's always someone there to nudge you alive. Nice little good thing from Raymond, which goes into another one of Frank's little zingers, which is one of my favorite Frank Barone lines. See in a lot of the compilation videos you see of his lines, I would like a minute for rebuttal. I can only imagine what Frank Barone's marriage rebuttal would be. Probably be a whole long, thought out thing that's poorly worded and thought out, but it's funny. I mean, we've seen him say stuff. I mean, the whole taxi speech alone should probably tell you what Frank is probably going to say. Then after this, we get Robert's retort about why he has his reasons for not wanting to get married. Which, when I first saw this episode, I wasn't as in tune with sarcasm as I am now. Like, I didn't even hear the word sarcasm or sarcastic until I was in middle school. And I wasn't as good at reading sarcasm then. Now a lot better. So I could see the first part of this conversation that they have, at least from Robert's side of things, as sarcasm, because he's saying it, and he's saying it in a way that it can come off as sincere, but if you really are paying attention, you're like, oh, Brad is playing this as sarcastic. That's good. Which leads into his whole speech about why he doesn't want to get married just yet. And his whole thing is because he's lived with his mother for most of his life. He's over 40, so that should tell you. The only time he's ever been out of that house was when he was married to Joanne. He's never been on his own properly, so he doesn't know how to handle it properly, just in case the relationship goes south and all that. And he finally gets out, and Amy's already bringing him plans about marriage. Oh, we're going to move this there, and all that, acting like they're already going to get married, get together, live in the same house. When he wants to take that slow a little bit, get used to being on his own, and then once he feels the time is right, then they move in and everything. And as he says, I love Amy, but I'm not ready for plans. And then, of course, Marie counters that with her usual self. You're being selfish. And Robert's reaction is very justified, because that is way out of line for Marie to say that. Because as he puts it, it's his life. It's not Marie's life. She has no say in this. And as I was watching this part, a line that Amy says in a later episode when these two do actually get back together at the end of this season, which that's a, if you're watching these in tandem with me each week, spoiler, but they do get back together. I mean, I think I've already mentioned they get married, so obviously they're going to get back together at some point. But for this time, they get back together at the end of the season. And when Marie tries to pull her shtick there, Amy tells her, sometimes a mother should just butt out. And that is true. This is a situation where a mother should just butt out. Because it's nobody's business other than Robert and Amy. It's only their business. And from the sound of things, and even Robert even says it, Ray was not the reason that they broke up. Now, hearing all that stuff probably did not help matters, because he was already in that mindset, and it probably just made him feel even more down in the dumps and more like Eeyore, for all things considered. I mean, that's the reason that they say that Robert is kind of like Eeyore, all depressed and all that. Just kind of good that they got Brad Garrett to play, because he kind of has that low Eeyore type of voice that he uses for a lot of these characters. And for now, Robert's going to be by himself. And that is why this episode is called The Lone Barone. Because once again, Robert is by himself, but he is living alone in his apartment. So now we're going to see how things are going to go ahead for him. So once again, the status quo has been shaken up. And it's one of the things that happens that is going to be referenced a couple times. And Robert and Amy's relationship is one of those constant storylines that they bring up every now and then throughout the show. Sometimes they break up and it's like, really? They broke up for that? Season 4, we're going to see a reason like that that's going to be like, oh my god. That's probably my least favorite of their breakups right there. I mean, other than probably their quick one at towards later in season 4. That's probably my least favorite one right there, that quick one. I think that was season 4. No, that was a different one. Of course, the big one, other than this that makes sense, is the one where she slaps him. That's a funny moment, especially since that one has a good raisinger, but I'll talk about that when we get to that. That's be towards the beginning of season 5, so 2 seasons from now. And that concludes my review. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. I got more good reviews coming down the pipe. And if you want to support the channel, the PayPal and Patreon links are down below. Until next time, guys.